Hey everyone, so I'm going to be explaining how to go through this task. The video might be like cut a little bit because I'm recording this at different times. So for the first part, I want to kind of get through a little bit of section one. So part one says saving capacity. So let's figure out what's happening here. This video is going to go through how to build the Excel sheets. That's one. It's going to explain the answers to all of the word questions as well. And then along with the recording of this video, you'll get access to all of the answers and the Excel sheet that we build together now. Okay. Not that you're going to copy it because everyone has the same one, but it's supposed to be a way for you to be able to look at how your Excel sheet looks. And if something's not working, compare it to what we did together in this recording. Okay. So we won't be using Excel. We'll be using Google Sheets just because it's easier to include links into a Google Doc. But if I keep referring to it as Excel, just know I mean Google Sheets. Okay, so create an appropriate Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet for your couple, one spreadsheet for person A and one for person B. Start an investment portfolio for each separate scenario indicated below. Your clients wish to start a saving plan to help with their retirement. They would like to invest some money in the bank now to create a wealth growth between $200,000 and $400,000. Choose an interest rate from the ranges provided below. So part A says calculate a present value investment for a future value investment ranging from 200K to 400K. The interest rate would range between 3% and 7% compounded monthly, and the term of the investment will be 10 for 10 years. So we need to figure out what present value we require in order to have a future value of a number you decide between 300, 200 and 400K. And you need to make sure that the rate is between 3% and 7%, and it's for 10 years, and it's compounded monthly. So this right now is not anything, no annuity question. It's not an annuity yet. It's just a normal compound interest formula. How much do I need today so that I have a certain amount in the future? It's not how much do I need to invest consistently in order to have a certain amount in the future. So there's only one investment or one installment. So what I'll do now is I'll share my iPad screen instead. I'll show you what the formula will look like. Um, and then we can get into how it works on an actual spreadsheet. Okay. So let me share this. Share that instead. Okay. All right. So question 1A requires us to just use our compound interest formula. Now, our compound interest formula says future value equals the present value times 1 plus r to the power of n. Now, you need to choose a future value that's between 200K to 400K. You can decide on this yourself. You need to choose a rate that's between 3% to 7%, and it's for 10 years. But because it's compounded monthly, whatever you choose as your rate, you got to divide it by 12. And then whatever you choose for, and then for 10 years, you got to times that by 12. So we're solving for present value, which means that we would have to then go and divide both sides by 1 plus r to the power of n. And we know the formula that we require is PV equals future value over 1 plus r to the power of n. Now I'm going to build a set of hypotheticals and I'm going to be relaying this onto the spreadsheet. So let's say I want a future value of $300,000. Let's say my rate is 5% and we know that the n is 10. So how would we set up this formula? Well, we'd say present value is equal to 300,000 over, and I'd say 1 plus my rate of 5% per annum, but divided by 12 to the power of 10 times 12. So I want you to just keep this in mind because we're going to be building our spreadsheet to do the same answer. So to find the same answer. Just so that we have an idea about whether our sheet works or not, let's actually plug this into a calculator to make sure that it's going to line up. So we have 300, 1, 2, 3, over 1 plus 5% over 12 to the power of 10 times 12. So we see that this present value for Musa's example has to be 182,148.3121. Cool. Let's go to our spreadsheets and try and get the same thing. So we'll stop sharing this, and instead we shall share my Chrome tab. Okay, what I want us to first do is just have an idea about how what even is a spreadsheet, right? I want you to think about spreadsheets as being just a massive calculator. It's a way for us to put in all of our information so we can visually see it, but we can also do a bunch of calculations within each of these cells. So each of these things here are considered cells. Now, before we get into the exact example, I want to just teach you guys some properties about the way that spreadsheets work. The first thing you have to keep in mind is that you can go and type whatever you want into any of these cells. So I can type, I don't know, also here, right? And if you press enter, press enter, it submits that into the cell, you could say, and it just moves on to the next one. But what if you want to treat it as a calculator? Let's say I want to find out what 1 plus 1 is. If I just go here, this right here where my cursor is the formula tab. So here I can type also if I want, or I can go back, get rid of this, and I can type some formula. Let's say I want to find what 1 plus 1 is. I'll put 1 plus 1. But what you'll notice is it doesn't actually tell you 2. This is because when you just type anything into here, it assumes you're just typing some statement or like a word that you want to have presented there. It doesn't know necessarily to do a calculation. All of the formulas or all of the calculations that you want to unlock with spreadsheets start by putting an equal sign. So once you put an equal sign, now you can say 1 plus 1, enter, and it says 2. Okay. So all of the formulas that we require basically force us to have to put an equal sign at the beginning, or else it won't do any calculation. Okay. That's one thing. Another thing that we can do is, let's move that out of the way. Let's say I have, I don't know, 3 numbers, 100, 300, 900. And I want to find the average of these 3 numbers. Of course, you can add them up yourself and then just divide by 3. Or what you can do is you can type, let's say you want to put the average right here. You'll say equals, and then there's a bunch of functions within Excel. Okay. The function says, for example, one of the functions is average. So you click this, and then you can drag the values that you want. All right, and then close the bracket off so it's closed off. So basically, it says find the average of the numbers from B2, so cell B2, all the way to B4. Do that, you 433 point whatever. Okay. So you can see that there's a bunch of functions. There's things like average, there's things like standard deviations, there's all of these different things, right? And they can help us find out, yeah, well, they can help us just summarize or calculate things really quickly. So that's a little bit of an intro, but in order to be able to actually answer a lot of the questions that we're going to be dealing with using Excel, we have to know a couple more tricks about what makes these spreadsheets so interesting. So one of the interesting properties of spreadsheets is that there's this thing called pattern recognition, right? So let's say here I put 1, 2, 3. We all know what the next number is supposed to be in this pattern, right? In this sequence, 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then 7, and then 8, and whatever. But let's say I want to put every number I want to count from 1 all the way to, I don't know, 50, 20. Let's make life easier, 20. No one's bothered to sit here and go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because that's too much effort, like to go all the way up to 20. Instead, let's just say we have those 3. What you can do is you can highlight all 3 of these. So highlight them and then use this little circle thing there and drag that down. What that does is, because we highlighted these 3, it looks at the pattern between these 3, and then it continues it down all the way until 20. We've gone a little bit too far, so get rid of that. Okay? So it's recognized the pattern. What would have happened if we didn't have the 3 there? Let's see. Let's say I just highlighted these 2 and then pulled that down. Still, it recognizes that most likely you're just adding by 1. Okay, every time. The problem is if you just only highlight the first and then drag that down, the Excel sheet will just think that the pattern is make all the numbers 1. Okay, so make sure you've highlighted a couple of them. That way it recognizes the pattern that you're trying to build and then continues it forwards. What's also really cool is the fact that Excel knows to go down a cell when applying a new rule. I'll tell you what I kind of mean by this. Let's say I want to create a product table, okay, and I want to have like product. We can say like number one, number two, and then the product of numbers one and two here. Let's create a little bit of a, let's press this, put a little bit of a border. You can double click that to make it fit the whole thing. And then let's make this like that. So let's say, I don't know, I have a certain number here, 3, and I have another number here, 8. And I want this cell to automatically tell me what the product of these two numbers would be, what the product of 3 and 8. I can't just put 24, but that means if I have more numbers here, let's say 6 and then 15, doesn't know necessarily what to do. What you can do here is you can put equals this times that. So star means times. Okay. You get 24. I'm just going to ignore that for a moment. Now, if you have 6 and 15, what you would do is you would just say, okay, well, let me highlight this because it recognizes what the pattern is, and let me drag that down. 6 times 15 is 90. Notice how here in this product, it says C4 times D4, C4 times D4. Excel knows that when you go down to the next row, you should be now not looking at C4 and D4, you should be looking at C5 and D5 and multiplying those two numbers together. Okay? So it's pretty cool, which means that even if I want to put something else here, let's say I want to put 7 and 11, then all I have to do is drag this one down to there, and you can see it works out the exact same. So it knows no longer to look at C5 and D5, but to look at C6 and D6. That's perfect. But what happens when we have certain cases where I write this a little bit different, right? We'll copy the same table in. Let's clear all those numbers. And let me, like, what if I want to just put 3 here and I want to put 8 there? Of 3, and we can put number 2. So what I want to do is I want to take every single number, like for example, this cell that I've got in blue, I want it to be 3 times 4. In the next row, I want it to be 3 times 5. And in the next row, I want it to be 3 times 8. So if I do the same thing and I say it's this times this, it works out perfectly. But if I take that and drag it down, it gives me 0. Because right now, the pattern, just like in the table below above, thinks that if you've gone down one cell, all of these, you shouldn't be looking at 4, you should be looking at 5. If you shouldn't be looking at 3, you should be looking at this one. But this is empty, so it considers it as a 0. So what we should be doing here is we should be saying, actually, when I'm looking at this multiplication here, I don't want it to think that if I go down one row, I should stop looking at C10 and look at C11. I want it to always look at C10. So what you can do is you can fix a value, which means click this C10 and press function, which is Fn, and then 4, F4, and then it puts dollar signs there. What that tells Excel nowadays now is always look at C3. It doesn't matter if I drag down, oh, sorry, always look at C10. Doesn't matter if I drag down or drag up or move right or move left. It's always, always, always going to look at that number in this cell. So now it doesn't change this one because it's still always going to look at C10. But now if I take this and drag it down, it knows to still look at that number here. Okay? So it fixes it to always look back at that number. Those are the main things that we have to know in order to be able to use Excel. But a lot of the other things we'll pick up along the way as we go through some questions. So now that we know how to fix, now that we know that we can drag down, now that all of that, let's figure out how to actually answer question 1A. So here is how I would set up a table in Excel. I think it makes it the clearest. And I don't know, I feel like all my students last year liked the way that this was structured. So for my case, the way I like to do it is I like to create a table for my inputs and a table for my outputs. So some of the outputs that I needed were the present value that you need. And as we will read in part B, it also asks us for the interest earned. So that's why I already put that there as well. Okay. So the future value that, and also I have these in yellow because these are the ones that you can change. Okay. The rest of these are like either fixed or a formula that we're going to plug in. So you decide on the future value that you want. For our example, we decided that the future value we wanted was 300,000. We also decided that the rate was 5%. The number of years, they already told us it's 10, so we can't change that number. And compounding frequency, so how many times per year will you compound the investment? 12, because it's per month, so it's 12 times a year. So when we go to set up this formula for present value, we're going to set it up just like how the equation I gave set it up. Okay, so it's going to look like, remember it was 300,000, but I'm not going to write 300,000. What I'm going to do is I'm gonna just put here three. I'm gonna put this number. So I'm gonna click that cell. Then I'm gonna divide by open bracket 1 plus 5%. So click that cell. Divided by 12. So click that cell. All to the power of 10 times 12. So we get the same number. Now your number might not look like that. Your number might look like, how will your number look like? Because I've already fixed this so it looks nicer. Okay, so your number will look like this because it doesn't know that it's looking for money. So what you should do is you should press this format as currency, and now it knows to just put it to two decimal points and then to put a dollar sign. Or if that dollar sign doesn't pop up as one of your options, go to more formats and then click currency. Okay? Don't worry about financial, don't worry about accounting. These are just brackets because in accounting you use brackets to represent negatives, but that's not what we're doing here. So just put currency. Now, what would be the interest earned over the life of the investment? Well, the amount of interest you earn is equal to the future value. So you click equal, you press equals, future value minus present value. That's how much. Okay. So remember, if you want to include a certain number in your formula, you just click that cell and then it pops up into the formula. So if you look here, C3 minus C10. Cool. So you'd have to do this for person A and for person B. Make sure to do that. Part B says complete the above for a 20-year investment and determine the interest earned over this period compared with half its investment life. Okay. So it says, well, what if you're now investing a certain amount of money, but you're investing it for 20 years instead? So let's see how we can set this up. So we're going to go to the next sheet, which says part 1, question 1, B plus an A. And let's fill in everything. So we still want the same future value. We still want a $300,000 future value. So let me put this as a dollar sign. So as a currency. The rate, we have to make it the same. So 5%. The number of years, we want it to now be 20. And the compounding frequency is still 12. It's 12 times a year. See how all of these aren't in yellow? That's just me showing you that you're not supposed to change these numbers and make them what you want. They have to be consistent with either numbers they've given you, 10 and 12, or the numbers you decided on before. You don't have to make them yellow in your spreadsheet. This is just so I'm showing you which ones you mess with, which ones you don't mess with. So now present value you need is going to be the same thing. So present value is going to equal future value. So click that, divided by 1 plus the rate, which is 5%, divided by 12 to the power of, open bracket, 20 times 12, close bracket. $110,593.36. Let me make sure that number's correct because I have this set up. Yeah, perfect. So Interest earned over the life of the investment. Well, this is going to be quite easy as well. Interest earned is how much the future value was minus how much the present value was. So that's $189,406.64. That's how much interest we would have earned if we did this over 20 years. But we got to compare this because the question says here, it says, determine the interest earned over this period compared with half of its investment life. So if we now do it, compare it with half of its investment life, we got to look at how much interest we would have earned if it was only over 10 years. So we're going to put here equals, and we're going to go back to here and we're going to click the number that gave us the interest. So that one there. So all we did is press equals, go to the past sheet, and then click that interest earned over life of investment number. So had we invested over 10 years, we would have gained only this much in interest. Whereas had we invested over 20 years, we would have gained this much in interest. So how much more interest did they earn because they invested over 20 years? Well, you will do that number minus that number. So why do you earn more interest if you invest for a longer period of time? We have the same future value. Both of them have a future value of 300K. Well, if you're going to invest over 20 years, you know you don't need as much money to start off with to invest today, as opposed to if you were only going to invest for 10 years. Because if I invest, let's say, for example, $110,593, that's going to gain so much interest over the next 20 years, and then it'll make it worth 300 grand. Whereas if I only had 10 years worth of compounding, then to get 300 grand, I actually need more money because I'm going to get less compounding. So I get less interest. So we can see we make an extra almost 82,000 in interest. Wait, how much? Sorry, not 82, 71,554. Well, I don't know why I tried to do calculation. The number's right there. Perfect. So your table should look something like this. Again, you can make these as fancy as you'd like. Change some of these colors, do whatever you need to do, but that's the way I would set it up. Okay, let's come back to here. It says using the information from part A, your clients would now like to increase their saving capacity by making more regular contributions into their savings account. So on the anniversary of the 10th year, an initial and single amount of $1,000 is a single $1,000 contribution is made, and monthly contributions thereafter ranging from $500 to $700 up until the 20th anniversary. Complete calculations using spreadsheets which show this compound growth over a 20-year period for each person. Okay, cool. So let's go back to my iPad and let's draw a little bit of a timeline to see what's happening here. I will share this instead. Check out my haircut. I don't know if I faded it correctly or not. It doesn't look like it's really that faded, eh? Oh, not good. Does my beard look faded? Not really either. The problem is I have a certain type of lighting in my bathroom where it kind of creates like a shadow, and the shadow makes it look more faded. And then once I get out of it, it no longer looks as good. I don't know what the solution is. Maybe I need to get my own lighting. Maybe I should just stop cutting my own hair. We'll figure it out. Okay. So question 1C, we didn't need to do B. I want you to think about this in terms of a timeline. So if we read the wording of the question, it said after the first 10 years have passed. Okay, so imagine this point here, it's after 10 years. And then it's for the next 10 years because it says up to the 20th year. And if 10 years have passed, that means it's only another 10 years. Cool. Well, if we look at what's happening, we got to figure out what the future value at this point would be if we're making a certain number of contributions. The first thing I want you to keep in mind is that I'm not starting with zero amount of dollars in my account. For the first 10 years, I invested $182,148.31. Then after 10 years, it ended up having a future value of 300K. That means that at this point here, I actually had 300K. At time, we could say 0. And because this is all monthly, we can put 1, 2, 3, 4, dot, 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 all the way up until 119, then 120. So we're finding the future value at this point more particularly. So what's happening? At the start of every month, we're making a contribution. In the first month, the contribution that's made is $1,000. And then in following months, it's, what is it, 500 to 700? 500, 700. Let's just choose 600 for the purpose of this question. So for my example. And it's at the start of every month, which means that's our last installment, because this is the last month. So let's just think about what's happening on a month-to-month basis. Well, at the beginning, I had 300K. I automatically added another $1,000, and then it gets, so we add up these ones, and then it gets compounded to there. Then what do we do? So we multiply by, we could say 1 plus R. Then what do? We take this amount plus how much you got so we take how much you got compounded to, we add another 600 on top, and then we take all of that and we compound it again. And we're going to keep doing that for 120 months. So knowing the process is I started with 300K, I added 1,000, and then it compounded for 1 month. Then after that, I invested only 600, and then it got compounded for a month. We can actually be able to build a little bit of a table that follows this entire annuity. So keeping this in mind, let's go back and share my Chrome. Okay, so this is that's the wrong thing. Actually, I'm kind of spoiling the way this beforehand. Let's go back to my Chrome instead. Okay, so let's go here. The way I want you to set this up is a little bit like this. You don't have to write this down, but this is just me explaining. This aspect is an annuity. At the end of the 10th year, the person has however much money you made the future value from above or from before. No, there we go. We can consider that to be A0, which is the amount that that is in the account at the end of the 0th month, which just basically means at the beginning of this full investment. So how much money is in the account after the first 10 years? Well, Musa made this 300 grand from the first part, so we have to follow through with that. We can't change it. The rate is also 5%. I can't change that because I'm making it all consistent. The number of years I'm looking into the future, well, I'm looking into future for 10 years because it's only for another 10 years and it's being compounded 12 times a year. How much was my first installment? They've told me my first installment was $1,000. Then how much are your monthly installments? See how this is in yellow? This is the only one you're deciding on for this question. Everything else has either been given in the question or is based on numbers you've decided on before. So I made our monthly installments for this example 600. Now I want you to create this annuity table. It's not the same present value, future value tables that we've given questions on in class, but it's just a different kind of annuity table. So I want you to put nice headings like month. I've got this referred to as the value of the annuity at the beginning of the month, or we can consider it to be like the principal. Then we have the installment, which is how much that has been invested. Maybe we can put installment or investment. See how it's not like very nice? You can just drag it out a little bit so it looks nicer. There. P plus M. So I've made this principal, I've made this M for monthly installment. So this is P plus M. Because what's happening is, remember, you're adding the installment and then it gets paid interest. Okay. This is the interest earned column, and this is the value of the annuity at the end of the month. So let's go through this all together. So the first thing that we have is the value of the annuity at the beginning of the month. How much do we have at the very beginning of the very first month? Only $300,000. So put equals, and then that number there. Ignore all of that. How much is our first monthly installment? 1,000. So we can put equals 1,000. Remember, what does the bank then do? It adds these two numbers together. So I want you to do it like this. Equals that plus that. And then they pay you interest. So how much will the interest be? Well, the interest will be this amount times by 5% divided by 12, right? Because it's 5% a year, but it's per month, so we've got to divide it by 12. Then how much is going to be the value of the annuity at the end of the month? Well, it's going to be how much you had here plus all the interest you got, that. So at the end of the first month, this is how much money is in the account. So then when we do the value of the annuity at the beginning of the next month, the beginning of the second month, it's just going to equal, so we can put equals that number there. Because the end of the first month is the same as the beginning of the second month. Now, what's my installment? It's not 1,000, it's 600. So I can click here and put equals. What's my P plus M? Well, it's going to be that number plus that number. What's my interest earned? It's going to be that number times 5% over 12. And then what's this number going to be? It's going to be P plus M plus the interest. Now, are we going to keep going and doing this all the way? We need to go. So I've only got 1 to 11. That's a bit annoying. I need to go from 1 all the way to 120. So luckily, even if you didn't write out all of these, let's just say you only wrote out up to 3, you can just take that and drag it down all the way up until you get to 120. Almost. 17, 18, 19, 20. Nice. Now, this is what's cool about Excel. If I hold all of these, it recognizes the formulas in each of them and then drags them down. So if I drag that down, we get this. But there's been problems. I feel like the table stops working. Look at this number here. This number says 4,796,011,622. So there's clearly a mistake with me dragging that down. The mistake is, so we'll get rid of all of that, is that I didn't fix any of these numbers. So look at what happens when I take my interest earned. Remember, the way I calculated interest here was I said it's that number times 5% divided by, maybe we won't put 12 there, we'll put that 12 there. The problem is that when you go down, this doesn't know to stick at 5%. Now it uses 10 as the rate. Okay, so that's why the interest is so much money as opposed to only 1,000, because it thinks that the interest rate is 10, which is 1,000%. So what you have to do when you come back to here is what we should have done is we should have fixed this C6. We should have fixed that so it always uses 5%, and we should have fixed this so it's always 12. So we're going to go here and fix that. Then we're going to go here and fix that. This one's fine. This one, see how here says the monthly installment is 600, but when I dragged down, it kept putting zeros. Why did it not know to keep putting 600? Because right now it's taking C10, which means in the next row it will take C11, and in the row after that it will take C12. But C11, C12, C13, C14 are all empty. And if I keep dragging this, eventually I'm going to get value of an annuity at the beginning of the month or principal. I'm going to get this number because it's going to go down to C15. So again, I needed to have fixed this and said it's always C10. So it doesn't change. Now when I drag this down, it should stay 600. So let me get rid of all, oopsie. Let me get rid of all of this. And now that these are correctly fixed, that's going to be always that number. 600 is always going to be that 600. This is always going to be that plus that. That's always going to be that number times always 5% over always 12. And this is always going to be that plus that. We can take this row and then drag it down. There we go. That number there is our future value of the annuity. Okay. So you can make this all fancy if you want. You can go up to here and you can put like a border around the entire thing. I don't really care. Okay, so this is the future value of the full annuity after another 10 years, which means we can go back to here and we can it says complete calculation. So all you would do if you wanted to do this for another person, or for person B, is first of all, you would duplicate this entire Excel sheet. So make a copy and then just come back to here and then change it. So don't make this 300, make this something else. Don't make that 5%, make it something else. All the rest of these formulas will still work. You don't have to rebuild the formulas. You just got to change the ones in yellow. That's it. That's the first part. So the next part here says using the information from part A, your clients, oh wait, hold on, part D, it says answer this question in your portfolio in the space below. How will it affect the future value and present value of the investment? You may like to consider the impact of doubling or tripling your contribution. So let's just read the marking criteria for question 1C, figure out what rubbish Carl Bruno wants. So it says correctly answers the question using the hint. Now, I'll write up a nicer answer for this, but what you would do is if you want, you could just go back to here and say like, okay, well, what would happen if I change my contribution? So let's say I make my monthly installments not 600. Let's say I make them 700. All of this is going to get fixed to 700. Pretty cool, which means we can come down and we'll actually get a bigger number. So what you would do is you would just go and say like, clearly changing the monthly installment affects the future value of my investment. Had I made my investment 700, I would have gotten a future value of this. Whereas if I made my investment 600, how much was my future value? 558,31923. So you can figure out how much interest you would have earned based on these different contributions. Obviously, you get more interest the more money you invest. And you might say, how will I know how much interest I have earned? All you got to do, if you want to find like a little bit of an interest formula, we can say here, interest earned over full investment. You can put it's a little box here. The interest earned over the full investment, well, it's going to be the future value, which is that, minus, now, it's not just going to be minus 300,000 because I didn't just invest 300,000. I invested 300,000 at the beginning, or actually not even, I invested way less in the beginning, and I'm all of these 600s and the 1,000 at the front. So we can do is this number minus the sum, and then that opens up a little bracket, and then we can drag all of this so that no matter if we change it, it doesn't affect it. But then also minus, where's our present value? Present value was all the way back here. 182,148.31. So minus that number. So when we come back to here, it shows that this is the amount of interest we would have earned. Make this green because it's for money. Okay. So if we change this automatically, so see, if I made $600 installments, this is how much interest I earned over the entire annuity, over the entire 20 years. Whereas if I made my monthly contributions 700, wait, let's just see what it was before. 333, 334,000. If I make this 700, I make 337,000. So just give yourself a couple of different examples and say this is how much interest I would have earned in different cases. Sounds good? Nice. Now, part D, or question 2, sorry, says, oh, actually even says doubling or tripling your contributions. So maybe you can go beyond 500 to 700. Maybe, and then the interest will be way more. Now, question 2 says, what considerations with regards to the risk of an investment should you examine when comparing investments with different rates of return? So here's my little rant, and I've given around 6 different answers because I guess I want you to, there's a bunch of you, so I want to make sure you guys have some different things. Don't copy anything I write, okay? These are all just more hefty explanations of different things you can refer to, okay? So There are many risks involved with investing, and it is important to understand the general principle that the greater the return on the investment, the greater the risks involved. This is because banks, funds, and retail, so investment banks are like more, they're like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs, maybe they're called investment banks. Hedge funds are like, if you have a bunch of money, like millions of dollars, you give it to these people. We can even refer to them as like, if you want to do like superannuation funds, that's a bit of a better one to refer to. And retail banks, so this is like, all of our retail banks are like Commonwealth, NAB, Westpac. You get the idea. They all basically have to take the money that you give them, take the money that you have invested, and they go and they, I don't know, invest in different projects, right? So they might be, some of them are invested in real estate, some of them are invested in stock market. And they then, because they're using your money to do all of that investing, they pay you interest in return. Okay. So we all know the more risk, the greater the risk, the greater the return. Okay. So if your bank is returning you a higher rate, well, then that means that they're probably doing, maybe undertaking more risky investments. Now, in reality, the banks that that we're dealing with, all of their stuff is really regulated, so we don't have to worry. Um, there are, of course, times where some dodgy, if you could give your money to some random dodgy person, and then, they could promise a higher return, but there's a higher risk involved. Because if the risk was very low, then everyone would do it. So let's see how this affects our investor or our clients and what the risks they face are. So one of the main risks that we have in the model that we built is interest rates remaining constant. So if the client is constructing a savings plan for the next 20 years, it is highly unlikely that the interest rates returned by the bank or the fund or whatever they're investing in will have their what is it? The interest rates that they have their money with will stay constant. That's not going to be true. In fact, this is one of the greatest risks individuals face because they may have planned at the beginning of the 20 years that they only need to save a certain amount each month. But if interest rates drop, then they would have underestimated the amount and then no longer be able to meet the goal they had. So let's say this is me and I'm trying to plan for something 20 years from now. If I just assume my interest rate is going to be 5%, 5% per annum compounded monthly, then I'm going to build all of my contributions based on that. I'm going to say I want to invest $600 a month. And I know if I invest $600 a month, I'm going to end up with whatever the number was for 600. Let me go back. I know I'm going to end up with this amount of money, which maybe I need for something that I want. So that, like, I know I need this amount of money. As long as I invest 600 a month, then we should be good. The problem is that interest rates aren't always going to be 5%. Sometimes they might go to 3%. Sometimes they might go to 7%. If you're investing $600 every single month and the interest rates go up from 5% to 7%, that's better for you because now you get more interest. So if I change this to 7%, look at how much higher my number is now. 708 as opposed to, I think, 633 or whatever it was. Whoa, even more. What did I get? Whoa, 588 versus, what was that number? 708. Damn, that's a lot of an increase. That's pretty good. But that's like if it works out in our favor. What if the interest rates drop from 5% to 3%? Now what happens? Now I only have 489,000, which is almost a whole 100 grand less money. So what does that mean for someone who's trying to plan 20 years ahead? I can't really plan 20 years ahead and assume that the interest rates will stay constant. If the interest rates drop, I now have to start investing more than $600 every month so that I can make up for the fact that the rates are lower. So that's a risk that that you face by keeping your money and trying to plan 20 years ahead of time. This is why actuaries will sit there and try and model the way that they believe interest rates will change in the future so that they can make investments knowing that interest rates will change. It may sometimes be worth keeping your money with somewhere that has a more consistent return, despite it possibly being less than other places. For example, if you keep your money with Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, ANZ, or NAB, because of how many people rely on them, they tend not to undertake super risky investments in order to provide consistency and security to their savers. This will help you ensure you can plan better long term. And there's different investments which are made as long-term investments anyway. If you're investing with something like a fund or a hedge fund or a superannuation company, the returns are generally higher than if you invest or keep your money in a big bank like Commonwealth or Westpac, because they can take greater risks, kind of. This creates a risk for the investor because they may see a bank that has much higher interest rates, which is very enticing, but they need to consider the events that their life savings may completely disappear because the bank may become bankrupt if their investments go bad. So they should consider the track record of the bank they keep their money with and may choose to go for a more secure option instead of facing the risk they lose all their money. This has actually happened recently with Signature Value Bank and, or what was it? Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. This is yeah, it happened last year. It's not really recent anymore, but it was big news last year. I think they had a lot of money in crypto and that kind of like fumbled it. And also they were just a pretty dodgy bank. That's the problem. If you try and put your money with somewhere that's going to give you a higher return, there's a higher chance something wrong could happen. Okay. So just be careful, I guess. They might lose your money. There is a little bit of an asterisk here because I do want to talk about something called, this is a kind of irrelevant for the thing, but it's fun facts. I believe it's called the Financial Credit Scheme, what is it? FCS Australia? Not Surfboard Fins. What is it? Financial Claims Scheme. Okay, that's it. It is FCS. Okay. So one of the problems is that people might run into is you might lose faith in the fact that the bank's running. Like, what if the bank decides to invest all their money in like Dogecoin or something and then loses all of the money? They, of course, can get in a lot of trouble for that. But at the end of the day, you still lost your money. So what does the government do? In order for us to all feel comfortable leaving our money with the banks, the government basically says, hey, listen, if something happens to your bank and they lose all your money, we'll pay you up to $250,000 of the money that you lost. So let's say I had 200 grand in an account and the bank loses it, the government will just pay me the $200,000. Let's say I had $400,000 in the bank will only pay me 250 grand of that. So what happens if you have more than 250 grand? You just need to open up multiple accounts with multiple banks because it's per bank per person. So if I have 500K, I'm not going to put it all in one bank account because the bank could lose all 500K and then I'd only get back 250 grand from the government. But if I had 250K here and 250K here, then even if, first of all, unlikely both banks will collapse, right? If it's due to dodgy business in one of them. But let's say that they both collapse, the government will pay me 250 for this one and 250 for this one. That's pretty good. Okay. In terms of other risks that you could refer to, when you're comparing investments with different rates of return, yeah, the higher the rate, the more risky it is. The lower the rate, the possibly less risky it is. So the more certain you can be. But also you have to basically consider the risk that the rate is so low that it actually doesn't even keep up with inflation. So inflation is when everything costs more and more on a yearly basis. This means that if we do not invest our money, it loses its value every year because we have less and less purchasing power. So inflation is actually considered a risk to your investment because let's say that I earn 2% of my money on my savings account, but inflation's 3%. I'm losing 1% every year. Okay, and that's compounded over the years, so it's more than 1%. So yeah, you need to just make sure that the interest rate that you get is higher than the inflation rate. Okay. So bank runs. When banks take your money, they don't keep it stored in a safe with a label saying Joe Dubai is a nickname that my friends call me. So I don't know why I decided to call this Joe Dubai's money don't touch. Um, my friends call me Joe Dubai because my grandma once commented on my Facebook something in Assyrian, like Majonka Jandaya, which means like What a good young gentleman, something like this. And when my friends decided to see what my grandma had written in Arabic and translated it into English, it translated to Joe Dubai. So they've been calling me Joe Dubai for the last 5 years. Anyway, so like, they don't just take the amount of money that you have and then just keep it sitting in a safe. The goblins at the bank get their greedy little fingers all of your stash and put it into investments that make them money. They make a lot of money off your savings, and in return for keeping your money there and not touching it, they pay you interest on your savings account, which is, of course, just a fraction of what they make. So, what kind of investments do banks put your money into? Well, they use that money to give loans to others to buy houses or to give money for companies to give loans to companies so that they can run their businesses. But they also invest in things that are long term. So if they're giving money for a mortgage, that's 30 years. Or if they're investing in property, maybe they could build it, maybe there's a lot of construction going on, and it's going to take time for them to be able to get that money out of that investment. So that's a little bit of a problem with banks because if we count up all the money that everyone has with Westpac, for example, the amount of money that we have all with Westpac is actually more money than the cash that they have on hand because they've taken a lot of that cash and they've gone and invested in things which are kind of hard to access that money back. Like if I, uh, let's say, let's say I work at Westpac and I've invested in a construction project, which is going to take 3 years, and then I can finally sell this big building. Okay. Well, what if people want their money now? I can't rush the construction and then quickly sell it off because like that's not possible, or I'll lose a bunch of money if I do that. So sometimes when people lose their faith in the banks, something kind of risky happens, which is called a bank run. Basically, a lot of people lose faith in the bank storing their money, so they all try and pull their money out of the bank at the same time. And let's say I start to lose faith and I'm like, you know what? I feel like the bank's going to fall apart. Let me get my money out before everyone else gets a chance to get their money out. So I'll go quickly rush and pull out my money. And then more people start to think that. And then the more people who start to pull out their money, the more people will think, damn, like if they're doing it, I got to do it as well. And then it creates this circular nature where we have a bank run on the bank, which means the bank is now like, well, my money's not here. It's out doing things. I can't give you all of your cash. And then once that happens with one bank, everyone gets scared and does it with their banks. This is a big problem for the economy. Okay. So a risk that you face by having your money in investments is the fact that you might not be able to necessarily access that money. Okay. A risk that investors may face is that they will not be able to withdraw their money because the bank will freeze withdrawals from everyone to prevent a bank run. Yeah, so if they feel like that's going to happen, they actually have the right to say, that's it, no more withdrawals until we can figure this thing out. Okay. Uh, Another risk is, it's not even really a risk, but it's just another thing that you can add. A risk that the client will have to consider is whether the bank has any yearly banking fees. The banking fee may make up a great deal of how much you actually make in interest. Just depends. I don't think my banks have any fees, but yeah, could pop up. Like superannuation, they all have yearly fees, so be careful with that. Okay, another thing is you got to look at how the interest rate is actually described in the terms of the bank account that you have. So sometimes the interest rates that are offered on a bank account are subject to conditions like, for example, this minimum monthly deposit. So every month you have to invest $1,000, for example. You can't end the month with less money than the month before, and you have to make at least X payments from that account every month. If you do not meet these conditions, you may not get the high interest rate they offered, but instead get some terrible one. So it says, consider this ING bank savings account. It didn't paste in, but let me actually paste this back in because I think it's worth discussing. So my friend is with ING and he actually uses this account. So here's what it says. They will boast on their website about a 5% per annum rate. Okay. And they'll say, oh, look, you can get this amount per annum. How good? 5% is probably one of the highest ones that we see. But if we read all of the conditions here, It says simply deposit $1,000 from an external source to any ING account in your name. You have to make 5 ING purchases, and you have to grow your savings account so that there's more in it at the amount in it increases every month. So if you do this, then you will make 5% per annum. So you will do all of your calculations in this spreadsheet based on 5,000 per annum. But what if something happens? What if you need to pull out money from that account for some purchase? Or what if uh, you didn't make 5 eligible purchases with your ING card, right? You only made 3 because you were trying to be more responsible. Well, if you do not satisfy the conditions, then the only rate that they'll apply is 0.55% per annum. Okay. So they're boasting about 5% and having one of the highest rates on their accounts. But if you don't do all of these conditions, you only make 0.55%, which is nothing. Like it's legit nothing. Okay. Instead you can go for other accounts which just give you guaranteed, and they say like right now you don't need any conditions. For example, Macquarie, I'm with Macquarie, and Macquarie just says, hey, we're not going to offer you 5%. That's a little bit too high. We're going to offer you, I think it's currently like 4.2% per annum. No conditions, no minimum monthly purchases, no minimum monthly investments, nothing like this. So yeah, just depends on which one you're more comfortable with. All right, well, we'll leave this for now, and I'll come back in a later part of this video for the remaining. Okay, so let's do question 3 now. It says compare 2 investments, option 1 with a fortnight contribution and option 2 with a weekly contribution that is half the size. Create spreadsheets showing side by side option 1 and 2 calculations for each person. So it says, yeah, it doesn't have much more information. So we're going to look to the marking criteria just in case it says something else. It says, from your findings, how will this change impact the future value of the investment? Okay. So if we come down to the marking criteria, let's just make sure they're not saying anything. It says 1 mark for investment A, 1 mark for investment B spreadsheet, 1 mark for option 2 correctly showing calculations for both. Okay, whatever. All right, so not that many things, but it's not saying for a certain number of years. So I guess we can kind of just decide on what we want. Just confirm with your teachers whether it's based on the same 20 years or same 10 years, but I'm not sure. So what we're going to put here is you don't need to write. This is how I want you to set up your table. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see. We have some inputs. These inputs are going to work for both our option 1 and option 2. So fortnightly contributions is option 1. Maybe I'll put that here. And then this here is weekly contribution. So this is going to be option 2. Nice. So the way I want you to think about this, let's zoom in, is in terms of some input variables. So this is another problem with the way that this question's written. You're not supposed to use the same rate if you're doing it weekly and you're doing it fortnightly. But Freeman hasn't gotten around to figuring out how that works just yet. So instead, we're going to be dealing with it, basically saying if it's like, let's say 6%, 6% per annum, whether it's for fortnightly versus weekly, even though they'll give you different answers. Okay, so you can choose your own rate, I suspect. I don't think it's based on question 1. But anyway, so let's just say I choose 6% as my thing. Let's say I do it for 10 years. Okay. Now my fortnightly contributions, they don't tell us what the contribution should be. They just say fortnightly and then weekly. So I don't know, let's make my fortnightly contribution $500. What will your rate per fortnight be? Well, your rate per fortnight is going to be 6% divided by the number of fortnights in a year, so 26. So how many fortnights will we have in total? Well, we will have 10 times 26 because it's 10 years, 26 a year, so 260. What will my weekly contributions be? Well, my weekly contribution is just going to be that number, 500 divided by 2. What will my rate per week be? It'll be 6% divided by 52. And then how many weeks will I have? It's going to be 10 times 52. Perfect, 520. So if I'm trying to find the annuity for per fortnight, I want the table to look a little bit like this. Period, so fortnights, principal, fortnightly investment, P plus M, interest earned, and then P plus M plus I. It's just like the annuity one we did for question one, C. Very, very similar. So if we come back to here, we can put in everything. We can say, well, we need to go from 1 all the way to 260. So let's put that in. Let's put 1, 2, 3, and then take this and drag. This is a bit annoying. Okay, I've gone too far. 260. See, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an X, 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 like that. The reason why is because now I'll show you a little bit of a trick. So what's my principal? How much do I have at the very, very beginning of my investment? Nothing. So we can say equals 0. But then I make my first fortnightly investment. So I'm going to say equals, what's my fortnightly investment? 500. And I'm going to fix this 500. So I'm going to fix it by pressing function F4. So it's always going to be 500. So if I drag this down, it's always going to be 500. What's my P plus M? What's going to be that number plus that number? How much interest am I going to earn? Well, it's going to be that times the interest rate per fortnight, which is this. And again, I want to fix this number because I'm always looking back to that 0.002307, whatever. And then how much is going to be the value of the investment at the end of the fortnight? It's going to be that number plus the interest. In the next month, how much do I have at the beginning of that fortnight? Sorry, the next fortnight. How much do I have at the beginning of that fortnight? Well, I have this amount. And then again, my fortnightly investment is 500. So I'm just going to drag this one down. Again, this is going to be that number plus that number. The interest earned is also going to be this drag down. So notice how because I fixed, see. Notice how because I put the dollar signs for that 0.002.002307, even when I go here, it still uses that 0.002307 And then this is going to be equal to that plus that. Now take this row, and what I want you to do is I want you to just double click there. Double click that circle. When you double click it, it automatically drags down all the rules up until the last row there. It's pretty cool. So that means that you don't have to worry about dragging it and waiting like we did for the 260. Anyways, so this number here, that's our future value of the entire annuity if we invest per fortnight $500. So let's say we have future value of the fortnightly one. We can say equals, and then let's go back down to here, that number, and let's make this $1. So let's make this $1. Now we need to do the same thing, but for weekly. So if we come to the weekly, it's 10 years, 52 times a year. So 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to take this and then go all the way down to 520. So we're going to be here for a while. Last year when I was recording this, I was really exhausted when I recorded and I fell asleep midst pulling down the formula. Oh, so close. Like I legit like fell asleep and then woke up whilst I was still dragging it down and then realized I dragged it too far. I don't know if anyone noticed in the video though. Well, actually, let's put some X's here. Okay, cool. Just so that the table knows to stop. Principal, how much do I have at the beginning? Well, I have 0, but then I make my first weekly investment of 250. So we'll go back to 250, click that, and then fix that. This is going to equal to that plus that. The interest earned is going to be this times the interest rate per week, which is that number. And then I'm going to fix that number again because I'm always going to be referring to it. And then the value of the investment at the end of the week is going to be that plus that. This number is going to be that number there. This is going to be 250. So what you should have done is you should have just dragged that down. Even this, you can drag that down, or you can just say here equals that plus that. Interest earned, again, drag that down, drag this one down. And then again here, you can drag that one down. Now that you have these ones, we can then double click and we go all the way down to here. Nice. So let's come back up to the top. Let's find the future value. So equals that number. Ah, you make more money fortnightly than you do weekly. Why? It's a pretty interesting result. It's a bit weird, to be honest. It's a more of like an it depends reasoning. So I'll kind of have to write up a little bit of a nicer response, but it says from your findings yeah, create spreadsheets showing side by side option one and two calculations for each person, sure. And it says from your findings, how will this change or impact the future value of the investment? Well, if you make fortnightly contributions, you actually have a higher return. The reason why that's the case is because remember, the earlier you invest, the more money you make. So the fact that I invest fortnightly, $500, it means at the very beginning I put 500. So that 500 is gaining interest. Whereas if I'm investing weekly, in order for me to put 500, I need to put 250 now and then 250 in a week's time. So if you put 250 now and then 250 in a week's time, you get less interest than if you had just put 500 today. Does that make sense? Because 500 is bigger and it's all being invested earlier. Now you might say, but why is that necessarily true? Don't we say that if we're compounding weekly, we should have a higher return? Yeah, but compounding weekly increases the return, but it doesn't increase the return enough to mitigate the fact that investing earlier should give you a higher return either way. Not either way, but should have a greater or significant effect on the actual final value. So I might come up with a little bit of an answer for that and put it in. But that's all of part one, I believe. Okay, so let's have a look at part two now. So it says reducing home loan. Your clients have asked you to place in their portfolio a few home loan reduction ideas to help them save on rising interest rate hikes and to be able to pay off their home loan sooner, to be able to save for a holiday and their future retirement plans. Following scenario home loan is as follows. So home loan principal between 300K and 800K, sure. Interest rates between 2% per annum and 4% per annum. Monthly compound interest, and contributions of $4,200 a month for 25-year period. This is very interesting actually, because usually in a question, they tell you like, here's the principal, here's how much they borrow, here's how much they pay off every month, like here's their monthly installment, find how long it'll take to pay off. Or they'll say, here's the principal, here's how much they want to borrow. They want to pay it off in 25 years. How much do they have to repay every month? Or they'll say they can repay this much and they want it to be over 25 years. How much can they borrow? But this question's telling you, pick a principal, pick a rate, and then once you've picked the principal and a rate, here's the month which they've given you, and you need it, here's the monthly repayment, and then you need it to be for 25 years. So if we read, like it's not really asking us to answer anything, which is kind of weird. So if we just go down to the marking criteria, part two, question one, it says calculate showing all steps the home loan reduction over the period of time given. So it's not necessarily that we're going to assume the loan is going to get paid off in that time. It's that we are intending on the home loan being reduced as we are just trying to find how much the home loan has reduced in that time. That's important. So let's keep that in mind as we build our Excel sheet for this. So the way I want you to set up your Excel sheet is to look something like this. So here I have a little bit of an input table as we have been doing. I call this the nominal rate per annum. That's nominal is because it's the rate that you give where if you want it to be per month, you divide it by 12. That's the premise. If it was the effective rate per annum, it means that it's not compounded monthly, it's just compounded annually. So we use the term nominal, but you don't have to write that. So we got to decide on a nominal rate. Let's make our nominal rate. What are the range of values? 2 to 4%. Sure, let's make it 3%. Perfect. The monthly repayment is already 4,200, so I can't change that. My rate per month is going to be that divided by 12. So it's going to be this B2 cell, 3% divided by 12. Then how much money did they borrow? Well, we have to borrow somewhere between, sorry, we have to borrow somewhere between 300 and 800K. So I don't know, choose whatever you want. 450,000. I don't know why this is giving it as a 450,000 like that. Nice. So we're not trying to find out when we pay off the loan. We're just trying to see what's happened in the first 25 years. Well, if it's the first 25 years and we're looking at this on a month-to-month basis, 25 times 12 is 300. So we know we have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 300 to see what's happening to the loan in that time. So let's just drag this out. It'll take a bit of time. Oh, that was perfect. Oh, sick. Some X's down here so we can just move on. Now, let's deal with what's happening. Basically, the way I set this table up, and this is the way that you should set your table up, is it follows the process in which a loan is paid off. First, we have the period, which is like what's happening in the first month. P refers to the principal. It's the amount owing at the beginning of that month. Interest is, they remember the banks take how much you owe at the beginning of the month, they charge you interest, they add it on top. So they charge interest, they add up the interest on top, and then they allow you to make a monthly repayment. And then the amount owing at the end of the month is just all the principal plus the interest minus the repayment. So at the beginning, how much did they owe? Well, he borrowed 450,000. So go equals and then click that number. Interest charged, well, it's going to be that number, whatever that number is, times by the rate per month. And make sure to fix this because we're always going to be referring back to that number. Let me make sure that number is correct. Yeah. So interest plus the principal is going to be that plus that. The monthly repayment we've been given is 4,200. So it's just going to be that number there. We can't change it. But again, let's fix this. That. And how much do we owe at the end? Well, it's going to be that number, which is the principal plus the interest minus the repayment. So it's going to be principal plus interest minus repayment M. So you can see we've paid off a little bit of the loan, $3,075 so far. Cool. Let's keep going. So how much do I owe at the beginning of the second month? Well, beginning of the second month is the same as the end of the first month. So it's that. I owe this at the end of the first month, which means I owe the same at the beginning of the second month. How much interest is charged? Well, we're going to take this rule and we're going to drag it down because it's the same thing. It's just that times the interest rate per month. So 0.25%. This is going to equal that plus that. This is also going to be 4,200. So let's drag that down. And then here again, it's going to be that minus that. Once you have this, we can take this and drag, double click all the way until we've gotten to 300. Now, here's a little bit of a problem that we run into. If your principal is 400, how much do we make our principal? 450,000. If we're making $4,200 repayments, it means we've already paid off the loan. Okay, we paid the loan off and some, because look at all these numbers. All these numbers are negative. In fact, we paid the loan off somewhere here, 125 months in. Okay. So what we should do is maybe we should make the principal a little bit higher to see what happens. Because you don't want to pay the loan off for this question. No, let's look at the bottom. Oh, we've still paid it off. Oh no. Okay, can we make the interest rate higher? Let's make the interest rate 4%. Okay, good. So choose numbers that are pretty high so that this last number is positive. It'll make your life easier for answering this question. So that number there is really, really important, which is in cell G312. So let's keep that in mind. If we go back to our summary table, we can say equals G372, 312. How did I just forget what I just said? There we go. So it just equals that number there. G312, yeah. So if I borrowed 800,000 and after 25 years, I still owe $11,668, that means that how much have I paid off of the loan? The home loan reduction should be how much did I borrow minus how much do I still owe? So it's that. It's just that minus that. That's an important answer because that's what your question's asking you to find. Let's make this if you look back here, it says create a spreadsheet that shows these calculations. If we look, it asks us, can you find the home loan reduction over the period of time? 3 marks for correct home loan spreadsheet, yes. Monthly compounding annuity is shown, yes. As well as monthly contributions using correct limits, yes. 2 marks for one, okay, sure. We've done the home loan reduction. And it's good to just have it at the top so that your teachers know that that's your answer. Cool. Now what we're going to do is go to part 2, question 2. So let's go to part 2. I don't know why I jumped all the way to there. Part 2. If your client is commonly paid fortnightly and the loan is repaid with monthly repayments, then what is the impact on the duration of the loan if they pay half the monthly amount each fortnight? So, and the loan is repaid with monthly repayments. This question's worded wrong. Okay? I swear, Freeman, disaster. Honestly, disaster. It says, if your client is commonly paid fortnightly and the loan is repaid with monthly repayments, then what is the impact on the duration of the loan if they pay half the monthly amount each fortnight? 2 problems here, 3 problems here. First, the question states the loan is repaid in monthly repayments. Why would it then say you are then paying half the monthly amount each fortnight? Does that mean that now it's no longer repaid in monthly repayments and now you can pay in fortnightly repayments? Or is it saying that you can pay in monthly repayments, sorry, in fortnightly repayments, but interest is still charged monthly? I don't know. That's one problem, or that's 2 problems. One is here it's saying it has to be repaid monthly, but here it's saying what happens if we now repay it daily, fortnightly. That's one thing. Another thing is, yeah, are we still getting compounded once a month, or are we still now getting compounded fortnightly? The third problem is that, yeah, we've gone and used 4% as our rate, and we've divided it by 12 to get a monthly rate. But am I supposed to use, or maybe there's 4 problems. Am I supposed to use the same 4% and divide it by 26 now to get fortnights? If I do that, just like how I mentioned in an earlier part, that's actually wrong. 4% compounded monthly is not the same as 4% compounded fortnightly. What you would need to do is find an effective rate that is per fortnight, which is equivalent to 4% compounded monthly. Last year, that's not what they did. Last year, Ms. Bruno just said, use the 4% and just divide it by 26, which is wrong, but that's just what she said. So you might have to clarify whether you are supposed to just take that same rate and then divide it by 26 instead of dividing it by 12, or are you supposed to find an effective annual rate or an effective fortnightly rate? I legit don't know what to tell you. Okay. But I will show you how to actually find an effective rate, just in case this is what school wants you to do. So let me share this screen instead. Oh, charge. Now, I was going to give you last year's video because last year I kind of answered all these same questions, but I watched back part of it. Part of it was a little bit off, so I couldn't use that one. But also, I was I was very stressed last year, and I was ranting a lot about Freeman, like a lot, because the exam was written way worse than what it's written now. So I was just ranting way too much. I think half of it was a rant. Okay. So right now, what I want to get you guys to keep in mind is that remember, rates aren't the same if they're compounded at different frequencies. So we know that if I have 4% per annum and I compound this monthly, this is not going to give me the same return or the same interest as if I had 4% per annum compounded fortnightly. Okay. So if you really, really, really wanted to do this correct and you wanted to compare what would happen if you stopped doing monthly contributions, but you did fortnightly contributions instead, what we need to do is we would need to find what rate here, not 4%, what R would make these two equivalent. Because when the rates are equivalent, we can truly just compare how paying fortnightly changes versus paying monthly. Okay. If you don't find the equivalent rate, then we're not really comparing what happens between monthly and fortnightly contributions. We're comparing what happens between monthly and fortnightly contributions, as well as what happens when we just compound things more. So these fortnightly contributions, if we use the correct rate, this should mean that we were paying off the loan earlier. But if we stick to using 4%, this might actually make it take longer, right? Because 4% is going to be higher interest charge when it's fortnightly. So what you would need to do is the legit way is you would say, okay, well, imagine if I had 1 year and I wanted to find the future value of $1 using FV equals what kind of type? Right. PV 1 plus R to the power of n. So if I wanted to do it monthly, I would say it's $1 times 1 plus the rate is 4% over 12 to the power of 12 because there's 12 months in a year. Now, what I want to do is I want to say, well, what rate do I need so that it can get compounded fortnightly for 26 fortnights and be the same as 4% compounded monthly for 12 months. So I want to invest $1 and get the same amount. This is how you can find the effective rate because it's effectively the same thing. It's just one's ready for compounding monthly, one's ready for compounding fortnightly. So what you would then do is you would then try and solve for R. So uh, you would take let's get rid of these ones. They're kind of annoying. You would take the 26th root of both sides. So then you'd have the 26th root of 1 plus 4% on 12 to the power of 12. equals 1 plus r over 26. And then you would minus 1 from both sides, and then you would times by 26 on both sides. And minusing 1, then timesing by 26 equals r, because everything cancels off. So let's find out what the effective rate would have been. 26, open bracket, 26 the root of 1 plus 4% over 12 to the power of 12 minus 1 equals times 100, 3.9964163.8% per annum. So similar, but a little bit less. It makes sense because the rate can be a little bit less because you're compounding more frequently, the return is actually higher. So this is something that you have to keep in mind for how we're going to answer this, or maybe not keep in mind, depending on you guys, I guess, asking Freeman and seeing whether you're supposed to just divide by 12 and then divide by 26, or do it the legit way and finding the effective rate. Okay, I'm going to keep this number in mind. I'm going to show you what to do in both cases. So let's go back to this sheet. Where's my Google Sheets? Okay. So this is part two, question 1. I think we went through all of this. Now let's go through part 2, question 2. So the way that this question's what this question is asking is saying, what would happen if we now paid fortnightly? What's going to happen to the time or the duration that it's going to take us to pay off this full loan? So I'm no longer looking for just 25 years. I'm looking to see when we actually pay the loan off. And we need to do a comparative calculation or comparative repayment home loan spreadsheet, which means we need to do one for when do we pay off the loan if we did it monthly, and then one for when did we pay the loan off if we did it fortnightly. So let's do this. So the nominal rate per annum is going to be the same rate that we used before. What was the rate we used? 4%? 4%. I should remember that. So 4%. The monthly repayment was 4,200, so we can't do anything. The rate per month was actually 4% divided by 12. The fortnightly repayment is supposed to be this, but divided by 2. So it's going to equal 4,200 divided by 2. The rate per fortnight is going to be, well, this is going to be the sus FCC approach. And then we'll do here, maybe make another one. Okay, so the rate per fortnight, the sus FCC approach is to just take 4% and divide it by 26. And we get that. Now the number of fortnights, well, we don't, this is actually not really relevant, so we can get rid of that. There. How much money borrowed? Well, we can't change this. This is going to be the same number as 800,000. So equals, and then we can just click that number. And then the rate per fortnight, Musa's legit Musa approach. Well, this came from doing the whole calculation. I'm going to put this in as 3.9964168% divided by 26. 9964168%. Whoopsie, I forgot to put the equals at the beginning. Nice. So it's a little bit different, this being the best way. So now we're going to come here, we're going to say, well, if I'm doing this monthly, all of this has to be in terms of that one and that one, these two numbers. So let's figure this out. Maybe let's make this a certain color. Make it orange. Let's make this orange. So we know that we're dealing with the same values. Cool. Periods, this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. The principal is how much we owe at the very beginning. Well, how much do we owe at the very beginning? It's just 800,000. By the way, this is looking exactly like the way that we set up part 2, question 1. So I could have copied that in, but I'll go through it again. The interest charge is going to be that times the rate per month, but pressing function to get it to be fixed. This is going to equal that plus that. The monthly repayment is going to be that. Fix that as well. And then this is just going to be principal plus interest minus the monthly repayment. That number there is going to equal that number there. By the way, if you want to apply a formula down, just press Command D. D, Command D, Command D. Now, take, maybe let's do all of that. Let's drag it down a couple more. And now we can take all of this. And we got to drag it out for a certain point. So let me keep dragging. I need to get this number to be 0 because that means I've paid off the loan. By the way, you might say, why did I highlight 2 and then drag it down? If I just highlight this and drag it down, that's going to think the pattern's just 96. So if you highlight 2, then it knows that the pattern's 95, 96, 97, 98. So let's keep going. Let's just drag this for a while. Oh, we're a little bit far. Good. So here we have 302 months. We still owe $3,331.94. But on the 303rd month, we now owe a negative. This means this is how many months it takes to pay off the loan. All the rest of this, nonsense. It's not even used in the actual. We can do that if we want, because it's not even used in the model. It just means that when you're 302 months in, you still owe another this amount of money. But when you're 303 months in, you owe $3,331.94. They charge you $11.11 in interest. You only have to pay this amount more, but you make that much of a repayment. So that's why it's a negative. In reality, when you get to this month in your actual loan, you will notice that like, okay, I only owe $3,343.05. I don't need to make a full repayment of $4,200 in that last month. I only need to make this repayment. So we're going to take these two pieces of information, we're going to relay them. Sorry, we're going to take this piece of information, we're going to take that piece of information and relay them in the table that we have at the top. So 3343.05, 3343.05, and 303. So when we come back to the top, I have a little bit of a summary table. So it says, actually, final written off value, we need another. So how long did it take to pay it off if it was in months? 303 months. The final written off value is 343.05. Because that's how much you had to actually pay off in the last month. You didn't pay $4,200. It was unnecessary. Okay. So now let's go to let's make this black because that's a useless position. So now let's do the fortnightly one. Okay, so it's all going to be very similar. This is how I want you to set up your table. Periods in fortnight, principal, interest charge. I miss playing Fortnite. It's been a couple of days. Maybe to reward myself after going through this thing, I'm going to go play some Fortnite. Interest charge, principal plus interest, fortnightly repayment, amount owing at the end of that fortnight. So 1, 2, 3. How much do we owe at the very beginning of the first fortnight? Well, we owe 300,000. How much interest do we get charged? Well, we get charged interest on how much the principal is, but times by, and we're going to do this using the SUS FCC approach. And we're going to fix it. So what we're going to write here, maybe just so we know, merge SUS FCC approach. Can I add emojis? I can. Oh, very nice. So that's FCC approach, just so that you guys know that I've been using this number here. All right. Principal plus interest is going to equal that plus that. Fortnightly repayment is going to be, where is my fortnightly repayment? $2,100. And then how much do I owe at the end of that fortnight? Well, it's going to be principal plus interest minus the fortnightly repayment. How much do I owe at the beginning of the second month? That's going to be the same as how much I owe at the end of the first month. Interest charged is still going to be, did I fix this? Yes. Did I fix this one? Yes. It's going to be drag the bottom one down. So Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D. Again, Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D, Command D. So now this is always going to be reading from up there. Good. Take these and drag. Okay, we still have a way away. All right, so we're going to keep going. Okay. My prophecy is true. Using fortnightly repayments should mean that you should pay it off. Actually, my prophecy might not be true. Maybe. Oh, this is fortnight, so I've got to keep going a while. Okay, here we are. 574. So it's going to take 574 fortnights for us to do what? What am I even talking about? It's going to take 574 fortnights for us to pay off the loan. And this amount of money, if we look here, is that's how much I owe at the beginning of the last month. This is how much interest they charge. This is how much is I owe after they've charged interest. I'm not going to make a repayment of 2,100. That's too much. I'm only going to make a repayment of this. So 1670.84. Nice. So we'll come back here and we'll say this is 574 fortnights. So it says, the question says, if you look back here, it says 574, it says, what is the impact if they, if you look at this, number of periods to pay off the as for both sets of calculations. One mark for comparison is provided correctly based on calculations. Okay, why did I read this as to say something else? What is the impact on the duration of the loan? Okay, well, what if you're going to compare it, you shouldn't compare one in months and one in fortnights. So if we know that fortnightly, so if we know fortnightly, it took 574 for here, we should probably find out how much that is equivalent in months. So how do I convert from fortnights into months? Well, 1 month, how many fortnights are there in a year? There's 26 fortnights in a year. We have 12 months in a year. So 26 divided by 12 is 13 over 4. That means we have 13 over 4. No, 13 over 6. I just don't know how to do any maths anymore. It's a problem. Yeah, 13/6, fortnights per month. So to convert from months to fortnights, we multiply by 13/6. And then to convert from fortnights back into months, we divide by 13/6. So it's going to equal that number divided by 13/6. So 264.92, which means you would have to round this up. So you can even put here right, ceiling or something like this. So it rounds it up. Because if it's 264, you wouldn't have paid it off. You would have needed another month. So in the end, if you paid it off using fortnightly installments, then you would have saved yourself 303 minus 265 months. So you'd have saved yourself 38 months. You need to make sure you give me that number because it's part of the multiple choice. It's part of the marking criteria. Okay. If you would have done this whole thing, but you were supposed to do it not using Musa's the Freeman Suss FCC approach, I believe it should have been even earlier. So let me show you. So if we come here and we put this and we say Musa's legit approach, you put some emojis. Heart, heart, heart. Everything is the same. Let me just fix up some of these numbers. Still 800,000. Interest charged is still. It's not going to be using this sus approach. It's not going to be that number. It'll be that one. And then fix that. But everything else is the same. So let's just take that down. Whoopsie. No. That's going to equal that number. And let's take this down. So it's the same thing, but I've just changed the rate. Okay. So if we look, oh, it's the same thing. I guess the change in the rates is so different where it doesn't make a difference. But in reality, maybe that's why they don't care. What's going on in my house? Can you keep it down? Okay, well, there should be a difference, but I guess because the rates are so similar, it doesn't actually make a difference. But fundamentally, you should not have used that rate. But I guess the sus and the legit approach work the same. So I don't know what to tell you. Let me change this at least so you guys know that I'm using a nice friendly color, like magenta or whatever. Nice. Whoa, 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 no, no, no. That one then. You can ask Miss whether or not you need to do the whole effective rate, or you can just do another rate. Okay. So you'd come back here and you'd say you'd have to make sure you mention this difference. So now let's come back to this and let's zoom back in. See? It says provide an explanation based on your calculations from your spreadsheets in question 1 and 2 above. Question 1 spreadsheet will look at how long in months it will take your clients to pay off their home loan and if any, what their final written off value will include. Question 2 spreadsheet will look at the difference in months between paying monthly versus fortnightly repayments and what that means for your clients' retirement plans. This doesn't really mean anything. Okay. So if we go down to the marking criteria, you probably should ask Carla Bruno what on earth she even means by that topic, that statement. Disaster statement. 1 mark for the period to pay off the loan in monthly repayments, 1 mark for the period to pay off the loan with fortnightly repayments, 1 mark for explanation with reference to calculations. So what you could do, this is what I would have done. Okay. We come back to here and we wanted to basically we want to make an argument about which one's better. So let's come to this and say monthly. It took 303 months to pay it off. But remember that 303rd month. So what we're going to do is we're going to add. Oh, wait, we didn't do the final written off value. No, it's an important number. Did we write that down? Oh, let me write it 1670.84. So what I want to do is I want to find the total repaid to bank in different cases. Okay, so let's add another one to there. Total repaid to the bank in the different cases. Well, how much did I repay to the bank if I paid it off monthly? You wouldn't say 303 because I paid for 303 months. You wouldn't say 303 times my monthly repayment of 4,200 because the 303rd month, we didn't pay off 4,200. We only paid that much. So to find the total amount repaid to the bank, what we would do is we'd say it's going to be, open bracket, that number minus 1 times 4,200. So not 303, 302 plus the final written off value. This is how much we pay to the bank. How much should we pay to the bank if we did this fortnightly? Well, don't look at the month one. That's just there because we want to compare it. But let's just look to the one that's actually in fortnights. We didn't pay 2,100. We didn't pay 2,100 for 574 fortnights. We only did it for 573 fortnights. So it's going to be 574 minus 1 times 2,100 and then plus the final written off value. Let's make this dollars as well. So in the end, which one did we, if we take the difference between them, this minus this, we get $66,772. What is that 66,720, whatever that number, what does that even refer to? It means that if I paid fortnightly, I saved myself 66,000 or almost $67,000 in interest. The reason why, and this is what you have to say in your explanation, the earlier you pay off the loan, the quicker it reduces in its balance. The reason why is because the earlier you repay the loan, the earlier you're reducing from the principal, which means the less interest the bank charges less interest. Okay? If you're making payments earlier, the bank's going to be charging interest on smaller amounts earlier. Okay? That's why. Let's go back to here. 1 mark for period to pay off the loan with monthly repayments. This is that 303 months. 1 mark for period to pay off the loan fortnightly, 574. Or you could also write it as 265 months, but this is more accurate, 574, because there's no rounding. And then you would say 1 mark for explanation with reference to calculations. Okay, yeah, just explain what I've been ranting about. And just say, oh, paying fortnightly is better because you reduce from the balance of the loan. In fact, if you pay fortnightly, you save yourself this much in interest. Okay. Yes. Now let's go to the next part. Okay. It says, describe the limit. Your client's portfolio. Wait, did we finish this? Yeah. Your client's portfolio should be making reference to any conclusions and recommendations for their future investments and strategic savings, helping them improve their financial future. Describe the limitations of your client's portfolio. There's many. So The big rant that I've been actually no, this one's not even the big rant. So it assumes interest rates earned and charged are going to be constant for the entire life of the investment or the entire life of the loan. So we spoke about in part one that banks in Australia do not provide the. So we spoke about in part one how when you put your money in a bank account, the interest rate doesn't stay the same for 20 years. It changes because it's based on how much money the bank can make. The bank makes less money, you make less money. The bank makes more money, you tend to make more money. The banks, the interest rates that the bank pays you also are tied to the cash rate, which is determined by the Reserve Bank. And that's based on things like inflation. It's based on things like whatever policy they want to put in place. So, because inflation was a lot higher, all of our interest rates actually went up as well. So that's why we had high rates of like 4 point something percent on our savings accounts. Whereas before it was much less. And probably if the rates go down, then we would also get paid less. So that's one limitation. It's that you can't assume interest rates that you get paid on your bank accounts are consistent over a long period of time. That's what part B says. But also for part A, when we did all of our models for these loans, we assumed the interest rate that they charge was constant for the entire 20 years or 30 years or however long these things were, right? For the 303 months or the 200 or the 574 fortnights. This is not true in Australia. In Australia, we don't have fixed rate mortgages that go for 25 to 30 years, which is how much a normal mortgage goes for. Banks only will really give a fixed rate for a maximum of around 5 years. All right, there's 2-year fixed rates, 3-year fixed rates, or around 5-year fixed rates. But they won't ever be fixed for an entire investment. That's like crazy. In America, they do that, I think, but not here. They only had fixed rates for a couple of years during COVID because they wanted people to be, you know, a little bit more comfortable and have some lower rate that they could fix. Whatever. What's the next assumption we've made? Savings accounts may have hidden costs like monthly, yearly fees, minimum savings thresholds to unlock certain rates, and minimum spending on savings accounts too. Check the ING example from before. This wasn't accounted for in the portfolio. Another thing that we've assumed, and here's a pretty massive limitation, is that we've assumed that the savings and paying capacity of the client will stay constant over a long period of time. Maybe in the future, they will be able to save more. This increases the future value, or they start to pay more off of their loan. So they can make bigger sums, bigger payments off of their loan, which means they can pay it off earlier. Assuming that they're just going to make $4,200 payments every month for however long, it might not be necessarily the best assumption, because if they make these bigger payments, they actually reduce the amount of interest that they get charged. So this is all based on like a single client, right? Just imagine if like I don't know, they win the lottery, or not win the lottery, because then they'll pay off the whole thing. But like an older family member dies and they get some inheritance. So they'll be very sad, but they'll be cheering because they can make a lump sum towards their loan and then reducing the interest. We've also made some sussy assumptions. We've assumed that we've assumed months only have 4 weeks, which means a month only has 2 fortnights. This is obviously false. Where did we kind of make this assumption? Well, this assumption we kind of got around because when I calculated how many months how many months in a fortnight, we use like the whole 13/6. So this one might not necessarily be relevant. But if you didn't do that and you just took the number of fortnights and divided it by 13 to get the months, then yeah, that would be an assumption that would be still true. This is the big assumption, which is if we use the SUS FCC approach. If the rate is given in per annum and you have to change it to fit the compounding frequency, we call that thing a nominal rate. So a nominal rate could be 6%, but compounding it per fortnight, so 6% divided by 26, is not the same, or is not equivalent to if it was compounded weekly, so 6% over 52. They are not the same effective rate. Thus, when comparing, these should say monthly. Monthly and fortnightly contributions in part two, question three. Part of the disparity in future values also comes from using unequal rates. Where was that? Part two, question two. Sorry. Part two, question two. Disparity in the durations of the loans. I'm sorry. And actual interest. Also, none of the models account for inflation, and inflation means that even though we're investing, we're not making as much money as we think we are. This is compare and contrast investment options for your client. So all you got to do is just go back to the investment cases. So talk about A and B, talking about what happens when you have an increased contribution or a reduced contribution and all of this. Tell me which one gave you the highest return. And look to use your interest as a good measure for for which one is better or which one's worse. It says compare and contrast loan options for your client. We've been ranting about this already. The fortnightly one's better. You can give some justification for that. Then it says by examining the information provided, identify any trends, make predictions, and draw any conclusions. Your client will want your advice to improve their financial future. So if you make more frequent investments, if the rate is calculated correctly, the future value should be higher. This is because you are investing money earlier and thus it is collecting interest earlier. This is from an investment perspective. The more frequently you compound an investment, the greater the return. Although investing a lump sum payment at the beginning provides a higher return than paying the same amount over a long period of time, an annuity is much more achievable in terms of an investment schedule than just like no one has $80,000 to just put into an account today. But maybe if every year you put away $10,000, that's a bit more reasonable, right? For loans, the more frequently you compound, the more interest is charged. We can also say, however, the more frequently you repay, the lower the interest charged, and earlier the loan is repaid. Okay, if you come up with any of your other ones, just put them in there as well. Let me know if there's any dramas.